I got my hand tied to a fence with a switchblade. I was 7 years old, ice pick in my head. My brother and I were going to school one day, and we saw a guy hanging on a telephone pole with an ice pick in his neck, you know. We came up in Chicago in the biggest black ghetto in America in the 30s during the Depression, right after Prohibition. And it was like being in Iraq. It was notorious. Our biggest problem during the day and challenge was to get to school and home alive, because it wasn't easy. You know, you had Toucan Pete on the corner of Wabash. There was a cop that was shooting teenagers in the back. All we ever saw were Tommy guns and stogies and big tables of money, because my father was a carpenter, but he worked for the Jones boys, who were the biggest black gangsters in the history of America. They had the policy racket and five and dime stores. And Capone and Giacomo found out how much money they're making and ran them out of town. And my father came and got my brother and I and put us on a trailway bus. That's how we left at 10 years old. So we were ready to be professional gangsters.
Luckily,
that's the training ground. Chicago was the training ground for all of them, Capone, everybody.
When you grew up, though, you were also in a time when America was really segregated. As a young boy, you grew up in, okay, I mean, black and white.
Was that segregation? Are you kidding?
What, I mean, as a young child, I mean, the fact
there still is.
Okay, we'll get to that soon, but as a child, do you have a first memory of like realizing that black people weren't allowed to go there, white people? How did this affect you?
Oh, ours was very simple. We never saw any white people. We lived in a very enclosed environment, you know, that had a gang on every street, Giles AC, Vagabonds, Scorpions. And you couldn't go to the next block if you didn't know the signals and everything else. And they had Duchess, Dukes, Senior, Junior. That means everybody, you know, women, men, old and young. I mean, everybody was part of the gang. And that's how I got in trouble, because I went in the wrong neighborhood, you know, and they stabbed my hand to the fence. No, it was serious. And they didn't need 9mm back then, because the guys would take a clothespin and cut off a piece of an inner tube, put a string around it about this long, and then tie strings to that, and take the tongue of a shoe, and put it here, and take a steel Aggie that you play marbles with, a steel Aggie, and take your head off and take your eye out. Man, it was amazing, unbelievable. And,
what about racism? I mean, experiences of racism?
Yeah, well, you smell that everywhere. One day, a white person came in the neighborhood, was drunk. He came to Raymond grade school, up to the basketball court, and he was making very derogatory terms about black people and everything else. The young guys, these were gangs, you know, and so they just ignored him at first until he went too far. Then they beat him to a pulp, and they took sheets and put a sheet on each leg, and then there'd be 5 guys on each side, took him backwards by the legs through the alleys of Chicago. Now, the alleys of Chicago are cobblestone, and they have wagons that go through there all day with big steel wheels, rags, no line, like Junkman, right? And the horses, they have one raggedy horse and this big steel wheels, and people throw their bottles out on the cobblestone in the alley. They just throw beer bottles, cop bottles, everything. And the wheels over time they just break the bottles down, and it's just like a snow of glass. It's like powder. It's so thin. And they took this man from Giles like this on the ground, and they had the towels around his feet, and they pulled him singing songs when they were doing. They had the and they drug him all the way face down and hands down from Giles to South Parkway, which is now Martin Luther King Drive. And when this man had got that, when they hit South Parkway, they just dropped the towels, and half of his face had been ground off with the glass. His hands were almost down to the nails, you know. But they were tough, really tough, man. The music was so powerful that before every social activist program was preceded by music. Charlie Parker died in 1955 with Bebop. Dr. Martin Luther King, 4 months later, I met him at Jackie Robinson's house. In the afternoon, I'll never forget it, you know. White shirt and tie, a bottle of beer. He said, my name is Martin King. So the social movement started right after the Bebop era died. Very significant. And after every war, black music changed because they were conceiving that if they fought for their country, then they had a little more of a right to be treated fairly there. They were wrong.
How did Michael Jackson affect the visibility of black artists?
Okay, well, number one, I just hit the genesis for a minute. Bob Pittman, who created MTV with some other people, said, I think people want to see rock and roll as much as they want to hear it. So we have free product, which is tapes that are promotional tapes. We don't have to pay for that. And I need 7 VJs. I said, how do you know you need 7 VJs? He said, we're smart. If it's not enough, we'll have 9 next year. If it's too many, we'll have 5. And he wrote up a $39 million business plan, took it to the Warner board. They threw him out of there in 5 minutes because it was too revolutionary. And Steve Ross, who was my guru and friend and head of the company, said, here's $50 million, go do it and build MTV. And so they did it, and they did it with a practice of no black musicians. It's supposed to be just rock and roll, but black, they don't, see, the third generation rock and roll thinks rock and roll started in Idaho. They don't know it's black music first, you know. They think it's white music. So we were down in Acapulco with Steve Ross at the Time Warner, the Warner Villa down there, it's a rest villa. And Steve Ross asked me, what do you have coming out after The Girl Is Mine for Michael? Because Rick James was freaked out because they wouldn't play his record, Super Freak, on there. And I said, I'm coming out, we're going to double clutch Billie Jean and Beat It. And Steve said, Billie Jean and Beat It go on next week. Steve Ross said that. And that's mandatory. It went on. And the real truth is Michael Jackson and MTV rode each other to glory. That started with a $50 million company. It's now worth $20 billion.
Do you think in terms of like political awareness or end of racism in America, do you think artists, I mean, between Michael Jackson and Malcolm X, who did more? I mean,
there's no end of racism in America. God, not even close, you know. No, he put music on a higher level than Motown did. Motown made it, thought it was a crossover music, so forth, the white kids and everything. Michael took it to a world level, like never before in the history of music. Off the Wall and Thriller and Bad sold to it was world music. That had nothing to do with black and white in America. The entire world. You know, he changed the surface of it because it's the biggest selling album in the history of music. Not black music, white music, or Russian music, anything else, you know, in the history of music.